Hello everyone, my name is Joa Hogan with the Iowa Hospital Association. Thank you so very much for registering for today's webinar titled Mindfully Learning from Defects with Dr. Brian Sexton. This webinar is part of the Healthcare Worker Resilience and Quality Improvement Series. The next webinar within this series, Psychological Safety, the Predictive Power of Feeling Supported When Things Go Wrong, will take place on September 6th. There will be a link at the end of the presentation for those attendings wanting to earn CME credit for watching today's webinar. Today's webinar also qualifies for nursing CEUs. Please make sure you return your Proctor completed roster form to hoganj@ihaonline.org at the conclusion of today's webinar. Please make sure the proctored roster form is completed electronically and that all nursing licenses are included. I will be sending out a recording of today's webinar that can be shared with additional staff within your facility. This recording will be available for 2 weeks and then no longer be available. I will also be sending out today's webinar handouts along with the link. There will be time for a Q&A session at the conclusion of today's webinar. Please type in your questions in the chat window and select Presenter and Host. Before I introduce Dr. Sexton, I want to alert you all that the IHA annual meeting registration has been opened. We have a great annual meeting planned for you all, and if you have any questions about this year's annual meeting, you can contact me directly at hoganj@ihaonline.org. It is now my pleasure to formally introduce Dr. Sexton. Dr. Sexton has captured the wisdom of frontline caregivers through rigorous assessments of safety culture, teamwork, and workforce resilience. His research instruments have been used around the world in more than 3,000 hospitals and in 30 countries. He has studied teamwork, safety, and resilience in high-risk environments such as commercial aviation cockpit, the operating room, and the intense care unit. With specializations in organizational assessment, teamwork, survey development, and quantitative methods, he spends his time teaching, mentoring, conducting research, and finding practical ways of getting busy caregivers to do the right thing by making it an easy thing to do. We also have last month's webinar's faculty on the line as supplemental faculty for today's webinar, Dr. Carrie Adair. It is now my pleasure to turn it over to Dr. Sexton.
Thank you, Joa, and welcome everyone to the webinar today. As you just heard, next month the topic is going to be psychological safety, and all I'll say about that here at the very beginning is very similar to the way burnout has grown in importance because the prevalence and severity of burnout has increased over the past kind of 10, 15 years. Psychological safety, which we've known about for a while, which is comfortable speaking up and voicing concerns, that's actually become a bigger issue over the past 10 years, not a smaller issue. So it'll be a fun topic, and we'll be going into that one next month. But just to give you a quick overview for today and what we're going to be talking about with mindfulness and mindfully learning from defects, I want to give you two different, and I'm not going to say conflicting, but they're two different views about mindfulness. We'll give you a definition from Barbara Fredrickson, and we'll give you a second definition from Helen Langer. About what mindfulness is and how it relates to the concept of like meditation, what's the same, what's different. We'll give you a couple of demonstrations about mindfulness, which is really the art of noticing. Are you noticing what's going on? Deeply noticing. And then we'll go into the tool itself, the Mindfully Learning from Defects tool. So this is a tool webinar. So we will be finishing with the tool. We'll give you links to other information about the tool where you can download it. It doesn't cost anything. It's been published. We'll give you some details on that, and then we'll end with future directions. Where is this going in the research and in practice? And we'll just start with a familiar face, Mother Teresa. She says, "If you judge people, you have no time to love them." And I think this is really at the core of what mindfulness is. When you are judging others, you're actually activating a part of your brain that's cognitively fatiguing. And so if you've ever done evaluations for lots of staff, you notice at the end of doing 30 or 40 or 50 of those evals, you feel just exhausted and depleted. And even if it's good news, even if you're saying, this is a fantastic employee, I'm so thrilled to have them, on our staff, when you judge others, it's cognitively draining. really nice about this, and this is some of this comes from the definitions of mindfulness that we'll get from a couple of psychologists, not Mother Teresa, but a couple of psychologists who study it, is it's about when you notice what's going on around you. That isn't cognitively draining. If you're not evaluating, if instead of saying this is good and that is bad, you're saying, oh, isn't that interesting? Oh, look at that. Isn't that interesting? That is not cognitively fatiguing. That's what we're going for. How do you notice in a way that's not going to be depleting? My wife often tells me, Brian, paying attention is a form of love. So I wish I could say that was a joke. That's actually, my wife says that quite a bit to me. But mindfulness, I'll give you a definition from Barbara Fredericks. She's a psychologist at UNC Chapel Hill. She says mindfulness is awareness of the present experience with acceptance, allowing you to see the big picture, to recognize patterns, and to enhance performance, creativity, and innovation. Just noticing the big picture, not getting enmeshed and saying this is good and this is bad. In a big part of mindfulness that you'll see, whether we're talking about meditation or just noticing, is pattern recognition. Are you able to see the patterns that we're talking about? And that's a big deal. Even as recently as 2012, it was the topic of the National Patient Safety Foundation for their Patient Safety Awareness Week. That was the top. Be aware for safe care. This is because one of our biggest risks in medication safety and in diagnoses is getting trapped in these patterns where we don't see the patterns. And ironically, we have the skills we need to make the right decision. We're just not seeing the pattern that we're currently in, and so we misdiagnose. We let things. We have slips and lapses, and we end up kind of in places where we don't want to be. So this does definitely have quality improvement implications. But let me give you a different definition. Now, if you look at Barbara Fredrickson's definition, she's giving you an explanation of what mindfulness is, and what Barbara does in her research is very much. She studies teaching people to be more mindful, and in particular, she studies different kinds of meditation. So, how do you teach people to notice kind of on purpose over time, and how that has very specific mental and physical health benefits. Now, unlike Barb Fredrickson, Ellen Langer absolutely is not talking about meditation. In fact, I've talked to Ellen several times about this, and my belief is that Ellen tried to meditate like a bunch of different times and she couldn't do it, so she's like, well, I'm going to find another way to meditate. That's pretty much what was about to talk to her. But she's really smart. She's a brilliant psychologist at Harvard. She was the first female at Harvard to get full tenure, so she's got she's full of stories about how to survive in this world. She says mindfulness is a flexible state of mind in which we're actively engaged in the present, we're noticing new things, and we're sensitive to context. And her whole point is that you don't have to meditate to get the benefits, to notice new things, to be sensitive to context, to be engaged and alert to the present. You don't have to be actually meditating to get those benefits. She shows, we'll do a couple of demonstrations of that here today. But this is all about whether you're talking about Ellen Langer or Barb Fredrickson. This is about noticing without judgment, just to notice. And Ellen Langer did a really interesting study. If you've ever heard of the house plant study that she did in these nursing homes, this is back in the 70s, and what she did was she would go into these nursing homes, and for the residents, she would put them in one of two conditions. The first condition, she would put a house plant in their windowsill and say, oh, don't worry, we're going to put a plant here, but housekeeping will take care of everything. It's just like, now you got a plant. In the second condition, she very carefully explains to the residents in the nursing home, oh, we're giving you a plant, but you're going to need to take care of it. You need to talk to it. You need to spray it with your water bottle. Make sure it's responsible for the health needs you to kind of engage and really take charge here. And as fascinating as this, as corny as it sounds, it's absolutely as fascinating. She actually showed in her study that those residents who were mindfully caring for their plant, turning it to make sure it had the best sun and during the different parts of the day, spraying it with the water bottle, talking to it, kind of stroking the leaves, like worrying about it. They actually lived longer than patients, those residents who were told, don't worry about it, housekeeping is going to take care of it. In fact, there was twice the mortality rate in the non-mindful condition as there was kind of in the let's notice the plant, let's take charge, let's do what we can to make the situation better for the plant. It was a fascinating example of control, and when Ellen talked about mindfulness for a long time in the 70s and the 80s, she thought of this as kind of like the mindset of I'm going to control this plant. I'm in charge of this plant. I need to worry about plants. That's evolved a little bit now. She calls it mindfulness. But she did another really cool study. This was closer to home for us in surgical wards. And here she had, when patients came into the hospital. Now you remember in the 1970s, surgical inpatients had much longer lengths of stay than they do now. And she kind of similar to the houseplant study. She divided her patients into two groups. They're randomly assigned to either kind of treatment as usual, number one, or number two, they were said, look, you're going to be in the hospital for a couple of weeks here. You're going to be in your bed. So just take the time to enjoy the time that you have. Make your time meaningful to you. Don't just get bored. Just make your time meaningful to you. Relish in the fact that you can push a button and someone will bring you food. Take the time to write letters. Back in the 70s, we wrote letters to people. Write letters to people that are important to you in your life. Just make your time during your stay here in the hospital meaningful to you. That was it. They weren't given any materials. They weren't given anything extra. It was just a very brief 2 to 3 minute kind of introduction to their stay when they were admitted to the hospital versus they were not given those instructions. And what they found was quite remarkable. Those patients that were given the opportunity, where they were given the instructions to notice opportunities to push the button and be thankful for the fact that they can have food just brought right to them and to write letters and to take charge of their time. Those patients, they requested half the amount of pain medication. They reported significantly less pain after their surgery, and their length of stay was a little over half of what the length of stay was for the treatment as usual patients. Now, all they did at the beginning of the study was they gave a different introduction. One, they gave treatment as usual. The other, they said, notice things during your stay, take advantage of the time, make your time meaningful to you. Very simple. I actually spent more time explaining to you what they said than they said, during admission to the unit. So fascinating that just simple instructions like this can make such a difference. Now, what is it? Where are we talking about meditation? We're talking about mindfulness. I want you to know meditation and mindfulness are related. They're kind of like overlapping circles in a Venn diagram. Meditation is a way of cultivating and being mindful on purpose. But there are many forms of meditation. There's mindfulness meditation. There's loving kindness meditation. There's transcendental meditation. It's not just noticing, but meditation is a path through which you can learn some of the skills. And I think it's interesting that this is a topic that's really mushroomed. Even as long ago as 2008, you can look at the steady increase in publications in the peer-reviewed literature about that have to do with mindfulness. It's pretty remarkable that we went from having a very small handful of studies in the 80s and a small handful in the 90s, but at the turn of the century, now we've got just this exponential increase in what you'll find is mindfulness in the literature. And this isn't going away. We keep on finding new benefits for people who are practicing mindfulness. It seems to be good for heart disease and for memory and for arthritis and everything except for halitosis seems to be related to the extent to which you're engaging in mindfulness. And you'll see more and more as it shows up in the kind of lay literature in the lay sphere. But let me give you what Alan Langer considers to be the three fundamental characteristics of mindfulness. Now, this is not meditating. This is just noticing. She says, when you're being mindful, you're engaging in the continuous creation of new categories. You're open to new information, and you're aware of more than one perspective. And she gives some really cool examples about how, if you want to trigger mindfulness, rather than kind of sitting in the lotus position and clearing your mind of all your thoughts, you can just take on another person's perspective. Well, what would David say? What would Julie think right now? And that's a simple way of triggering mindfulness. She gives a lot of simple little techniques like that. And Ellen is very specific that we need to be mindful because there's so many distractions out there. She even says, look, being distracted is just another way of saying otherwise attracted. And there are a lot of distractions out there. In fact, in the healthcare sphere, right, this is Westbrook's results, she actually showed that with each additional interruption or disruption that you kind of experience in your workday, that's almost a 13% increase in your rate of clinical errors, and in particular as medication administration errors. So every time you have one more interruption, that dramatically increases your likelihood of committing a medication error. And there's a lot of interruptions and distractions out there. This is Anita Tucker's research, and she actually showed that if you look in the inpatient world, there are tremendous distractions that we have to kind of endure. We're formally interrupted at least once an hour, but we're kind of informally interrupted between 5 and 13 times an hour, and each one of those can put us at risk for medication administration mistakes, just to name one kind of published example. And many people kind of assume, well, I'm fine, I can do it, I'm a good multitasker. Well, that's not what the data shows. In fact, in the psychological literature, you can handle one or two or even three problems more or less simultaneously, but you're task switching from one task to the next. You're not actually doing them at the same time. You're switching between them again and again. And you can handle up to 3 things at a time, but once you add a 4th thing, right, you can walk and chew bubble gum and hum, but once you start to whistle, once you start that 4th thing, you have a dramatic reduction in the accuracy of handling problems and your speed of handling problems. This is pretty it's pretty typical. I'll give you another example, which is kind of fun. This is the Union Pacific coal train, and this is an example of mindfulness, a wonderful example of mindfulness. The good news: it was a normal day in Sharon Springs, Kansas. A Union crew boarded and loaded a loaded coal train for their long track to Salina. The bad news was just a few miles into the trip, a wheel bearing became overheated and melted, letting a metal support drop down and grind on the rail, creating white, hot, molten metal droppings that were spewing down the rail. The good news was a very alert crew noticed the smoke about halfway back in the train and immediately stopped the train in compliance with the rules. Now you see where we're going here. Rules. The train stopped with the hot wheel over a wooden bridge with creosote ties and trusses. See where this is going? The crew tried to explain to their higher-ups, but were instructed, do not move the train. Look, the rules prohibit you from moving the train when a part is defective. Don't move the train. Don't move the train. Whatever you do, don't move the train. This is kind of the new normal. Don't move that train. Don't you dare. The rules suggest you're not supposed to move the train. In this particular situation, the rules don't apply. The rules weren't designed for this situation. And if you have mindful compliance to the rules, people and property, they get hurt pretty readily. This is, Ellen Langer would say, from a mindful perspective, your response to a particular situation is not an attempt to make the best choice from among available options, but to create options. To notice what you're doing, to be aware of more than one perspective, and to not be trapped. We'll talk about mindless versus mindful approaches like this. But let me give you a quick example. This has been attempted. I'm going to move away from Alan Langer and move towards a quick mindful communication intervention that was taught by, this is Mickey Krasner in Rochester, New York. And what they showed was that you could teach primary care physicians about mindful communication practices. And not only do these physicians like it, but also it was significantly associated with a reduction in burnout, an increase in noticing. Their patients reported higher patient satisfaction. Their staff reported higher engagement scores. It was a pretty nice kind of win for everybody. The problem is, if you're going to teach someone how to meditate, what kinds of effects, it takes a long time, and it's not a very easily scalable program. Otherwise, we'd be doing a lot more of it. For example, it takes 8 to 10 weeks of training. This is 2.5 hours of classroom time a week, 45 to 60 minutes of practice a day of doing these mindfulness meditation trainings. This is a big commitment, and if you're already distracted, if you're overwhelmed by life, if you've got so much going on and you notice that you're making mistakes, adding one more as yet to be learned life skill to your plate isn't necessarily the best use of your time. This is something that many people struggle with when we talk about mindfulness. So there is meditation. You can learn how to meditate. It does take time, and it does work, but it takes time and effort. We want to move away from just talking about meditation because a lot of people just aren't going to be able to take that on as a practice. And even if you do, this is an interesting follow-up to the Krasner study. Dr. Beckman did this. He actually showed that the physicians that participated in this program liked it. But even those that did it, that took the time to do it, they developed greater self-awareness and positive transformative skills, but they struggled. These physicians struggled to give themselves permission to attend to their own personal growth. So even when you're learning mindfulness, it doesn't mean you're engaging necessarily in self-care. But you'll see more and more of this. It shows up in the literature and in the news media all the time. There's a growing awareness that among physicians being mindful or fully present and attentive to the moment not only improves the way you engage with patients, but also mitigates the stresses of clinical practice. Now, there is some good news. We are starting to find people are paying attention to the workload associated with meditation training, and they're breaking it into smaller chunks, and they're learning how to disseminate meditation tools and kind of cliff notes, if you will, in ways that are a little bit less onerous. And so instead of doing 45 to 60 minutes of practice a day, they can do 5 to 16 minutes a day. And instead of being across 8 to 10 weeks, you can do this in as few as 5 weeks and still detect these differences in the participants. But this is fascinating stuff because it actually changes the way it changes structurally your brain. You get changes in cortical thickness. You get changes in EEG asymmetry. You can look at upregulation of the amygdala, downregulation of the amygdala, all in neuroimaging studies. So when you look at Tibetan Buddhists that meditate 4, 5, 6, 8 hours a day, they have profound differences not only in their neurochemistry, but in things like cortical thickness. You can change the structures in your brain, which is really exciting. That's also actually really exciting for people with PTSD, because one of the benefits of this is that what happens when you get a post-traumatic stress disorder is you get your amygdala becomes overactive and your hippocampus becomes kind of shriveled up. And they've actually found that with meditation, you can enhance the hippocampal volume. And that's one of the ways to kind of, this just goes back to neuroplasticity and to kind of regaining some of what we've lost. It's kind of exciting work that is going out in the background. It's also good for your kids. If you're interested, this is good for GRE, for SAT, for LSAT. People who engage in mindfulness actually they do better with things that require strong amounts of working. But what I'd like to do is give you a couple of quick demonstrations of just noticing, not meditating. This isn't a spiritual practice. This is just noticing. And this is Dunker's classic candle problem. And so in order to do this, the question is, can you attach a lighted vertical candle to the wall here without wax dripping on the table there or on the floor. And all they give you are these thumbtacks and a book of matches and this candle here. And what they found was that when you give people infinite time to solve the classic candle problem, they'll try all kinds of things. They'll try to light part of the candle and drip wax on the wall, and then hold the candle up against the wall until the wax dries, and they find that doesn't work. It's a very heavy candle. They try to stick thumbtacks into the candle and stick those thumbtacks to the wall, and they find that even there, because they're the rounded tops, the thumbtacks don't work very well for the people. People will try and fumble around with this, and they tend to give up pretty quickly. But what happens is that someone who notices simply says, hey, why not just take that box that you had the thumbtacks in and use that as a shelf? And only about 10% of the people actually figured this out. But if you look at those 10%, a large proportion of those people who figured this out, they spent time living in another country. They're open to other cultures or other ways of thinking. They're not kind of boxed in, if you will, to one way of thinking about a problem. Now, this is called the classic candle problem. It's a fun example of noticing. People who notice the box there are people who notice resources. And if you're mindfully noticing these things, you're going to see, I've got lots of resources at my disposal here that I could be using to deal with my problems. People who are mindful are they're just naturally more resource rich. If you're good at noticing, you tend to have more resources because you can be a little bit clever like that. Now, I'll give you another example. This is it's called the two-chord problem. So you have two cords hanging from the ceiling, and they're close enough together that you could tie them together, but based on the length of the cord and how far apart they are, you can't hold on to one cord and reach over and grab the other one in order to tie them together. So with the two-chord problem, what you do is you've got a table there full of objects. Now don't think about the table or the tablecloth. We're not using the tablecloth there. It's just you have a flashlight, a mousetrap, a flat screwdriver, a compass for making those perfect circles in geometry, and a set of car keys. Now, you can use anything you want there on the table to tie those ropes together. But how would you go about solving this problem? Now, a mindful person sees resources where others don't see those resources. And here, something working to your advantage that's very hard, again, for many people to notice, is that there just isn't a long enough implement to reach over and grab that other tool. So if you just take anything, tie it to the rope, pendulum it out, swing it out, on the return swing you can catch the rope and then you can tie it together. Now that's not just what's on the table, but how you can use other resources like gravity in your favor. I'll give you another simple demonstration here. You ever walked along, you're out with your family on a Saturday, and you're going to a museum, and you see a sign that says "Keep off the grass," and you think, "Oh gosh, I better keep off the grass." Now here, you just mindlessly follow the sign. Okay, keep off the grass, fine. I'll still keep off the grass, fine. But what if you do what Ellen talks about? She mentions putting people back into the equation to trigger mindfulness. What if you have Helga says keep off the grass? Well, now the first thought is, well, who the hell is Helga? And where does she get off telling me to stay off the grass? Hey, Helga, watch me goose step on your grass right now. How you like that, Helga? But all you did there was to trigger mindfulness by bringing people back into the equation. And this is so very powerful. If you want a low to no cost intervention that you can implement in most bedsides, later this afternoon, I double-dug to check out a whiteboard. Take a simple whiteboard. You can get these at Staples for like $1.87 with a little Sharpie marker, and you put it outside the patient's room, and you ask the patient when they enter, can you just give us a few facts about yourself so that as people are moving through, they can see you for who you are as a person. Oh, you grew up in Texas? You got 4 children? That's fabulous. Oh, you're married to a therapist? Lucky you. I wish I was married to a therapist. Oh, you speak German and English. Okay. Guten Morgen. How are you doing? Oh, you collect glass balls. That sounds very interesting. I wonder what that's about. But what that does is it gives people a chance to say, you're not just Mrs. Jones in Pod C. You're someone who has these facts about you that are relevant, that trigger for different providers, whether you're the resident that wasn't there at rounds this morning, or you're here delivering a lunch tray, or you're a nurse's aide. You can look at that list, and that triggers mindfulness by inserting the person back into that patient. Now we're seeing this person as not just the sick patient in the bed here today, but as someone who has a history. And when you do that, you enjoy caring for the patient more, and the patient enjoys their stay more because people ask them about them. So much of healthcare, starting with pulse oximetry, as soon as you get to the point where you're no longer touching the patient with your hands with your stethoscope. Now that we just put a clamp on your finger, and now we have with our computerized physician order entry, the patient comes into the room, and what do? We turn our backs on the patient so we can face the computer screen and enter all this patient-centered care information into the computer. My goodness, what are we doing? We're not triggering mindfulness. We're not putting people back into the equation. This is definitely about patient-centered care, being mindful, just noticing. It makes it more enjoyable to be a healthcare worker. It also makes it more enjoyable to be a patient. This is Alan's point. If you want to trigger mindfulness, you have to insert people back into the equation. Now, when I left Johns Hopkins about 9 years ago and I came over to Duke to start working at Duke, I commuted for the first little bit of chunk of time there while we were buying a house and moving across the country. And my very first day at work at Duke, I left the house at 4:45 a.m. I was going to catch a 6 a.m. flight from Baltimore down to Raleigh-Durham. I was so excited because as soon as I landed, I was going to have back-to-back meetings with all the senior leaders at Duke all day long. I was going to get to meet all these different people. It's really hard to get on their schedules. And on my way to the airport, as I'm driving to the airport that morning, I'm starting my new job, so excited, I'm going to Duke. And then I heard a thunk and a sound of metal scraping against the road underneath me. And so I pulled over, and I noticed that part of my exhaust manifold in my car had rusted through, and I was dragging that piece of metal along the highway, which is not a great position to be in. So as I'm sitting there, I had just finished reading Ellen's book, Mindfulness. She wrote a book called Mindfulness, which is a very simple, easy, quick read. She's very accessible as a writer. And I said, this is so ridiculous. My very first day at Duke, I'm going to miss all these meetings with all these leaders. That made me look terrible. And I had car trouble on my way to the airport. That's just great. Terrific. What am I going to do here? And I paused. And I said, what would Ellen Langer do? As I took a deep breath, I just kind of said, how do I create a new option here? Because I don't have time to call AAA. I don't have time to call a taxi. I can see the airport from where I am, but I'm not going to be able to get a AAA out here in time to make my flight. What do I do? And I look down, and there's this bizarre strap. I don't even know what this thing is. I slammed the driver's side door on one side, the passenger side door on the other side. I threaded it through the bottom of the car. I lifted it up at about 80 pounds, and with one hand holding this thing up in the car and the other hand on my steering wheel, I drove to the airport. I was just about 5 minutes away from the airport. And I parked the car, and for the rest of the day, I was like, you wouldn't believe it, on the way to work today, instead of, I'm so sorry I missed all these meetings. I'm so sorry that it didn't work out, that we got to meet all the C-suite folks at all the different facilities. This is what Ellen would say about being mindful versus mindless. A mindless person acts like an automaton. They're stuck in a rigid perspective, rigid way of thinking. They're relying on definitions and distinctions and categories that were made in the past. They're governed by rules and routines. Don't move the train. Nope, you can't move the train because the rule says you can't move the train. Whereas a mindful person is actively engaged in the present. A mindful person is aware of context and different perspectives. It's how you trigger mindfulness. Oftentimes is to take on a different perspective. A mindful person is creating new categories, new definitions, making new distinctions. And by noticing, it actually keeps you aware and engaged rather than kind of like disengaging and kind of just letting the world pass you by. A mindful person is guided by rules and routines, but they're not governed by those rules and routines. And there's definitely some health benefits here. People who are mindful, they feel more in control, they live longer, they have better performance, and they're happier. In fact, the number one thing you'll find if you're looking at what do I do about burnout? I'm a healthcare worker, I'm burned out, what do I do? You're going to find mindfulness is one of the most common things that you'll see in the peer-reviewed literature. And that doesn't mean it's the easiest thing on the meditation side. It doesn't mean that just engaging in some mindfulness, just noticing, is a way of feeling more engaged, a way of feeling more in control. And it will help with your creativity, your performance, and your mood. People will enjoy being around you and enjoy being around other people. There are two great books on this. In 1989, Ellen wrote the book Mindfulness. The book is just called Mindfulness. That's the name of the book. And then in 1998, she wrote a book called The Power of Mindful Learning. Like 1 or 2 day reads. They're very short. They're very accessible. If you're interested in this as a concept, I really recommend Ellen's reads on this. Some fun work on this content. I'll give you another example of work that Ellen has done about placebo effect and this mindfulness mindset, which is really quite fascinating. Now, by the way, the placebo effect is just a way of guarding against the reason we have randomized controlled trials, the reason we have random assignments and double-blind studies is because the power of mindfulness is, I think I'm receiving this drug. I think I'm going to feel less pain in my knee, or I think I'm going to get out of bed here more quickly. Well, that's the power of mindfulness. It's your brain. The most powerful effect, really one of the most powerful effects in science, is the power of placebo, which is just another way of looking at mindfulness. If you really expect something to happen, it tends to go that direction. So I'll give you a quick example of what Ellen did with a group of, these were housekeepers in a hotel chain in the Boston area. She had it's politically incorrectly called the chambermaid study. That's what Ellen called the study. But this is a group of housekeepers, and she was asked to look at creating an intervention that could keep them working in that specific hotel. And one of the things that she came up with was, I'm going to follow these guys around and just watch what they're doing, get a sense of what's going on. And so then she noticed that these housekeepers were doing a lot of physical activity. When you're moving back and forth with a vacuum all day long, you're really using your quads, and you look a lot like you're doing lunges as you're going forward and using the vacuum and moving it slightly, going back and forth again and again. She also noticed that when people are hundreds of times a day spreading out sheets across big beds and then tucking them in and spreading them out and tucking them in, that's very similar movement to what you see in Olympic rowers. And they're using a lot of muscles. They're using it's actually a highly active activity, and she was able to legitimately explain it to them. You know what? When you're working, it's like you're getting paid to get exercise. And would you just think of work as a way of getting exercise? And what they found was that those people who were in the informed condition, they were told to think of work as exercise, compared to the control group, they actually, over time, perceived having exercised more. They perceived that they regularly exercised at work, and their perception of work as exercise increased dramatically. Now, these are perceptions. Like, do you perceive this? Yes. But what did they find about some of the physiological markers? This is where it gets fascinating. Again, this is just like the expectation that you can build up in your head from a psychological perspective. The mean weight of the folks who were in the think of work as exercise condition, their weight went down. Their body mass index improved. The percent body fat went down. Their diastolic and systolic blood pressures both went down, unlike what we found for the control group. And their waist-to-hip ratio actually improved. These are a lot of remarkable physiological metrics. And all we're doing is we told them, kind of like in the houseplant study, just think of it in this way. And it made such a powerful difference. This is about just noticing little aspects of what you're doing anyway. And then as you do that, you get these benefits. Alan says noticing the little things is a way of regaining your sense of control and joy. This is something that really helps with noticing. Now, in this presentation, which you're welcome to, we'll give you all these links to these mindfulness research groups there are across the country. It's very easy to find them on Google if you're interested. But now I want to transition from this concept of mindfulness, like what it is. It's about noticing. I hope we've gotten that point across so far. And I want to transition into what this has to do with noticing and learning from defects. So I like Jim Reeves, and he's a psychologist who does research in human error. He says, look, rather than being the instigators of an accident, frontline workers that tend to be the inheritors of these system-level defects, and their part is that of adding the final garnish to a lethal brew that has been long in the cooking. That's lovely verbiage there from Jim Reeves. But this is about learning from your defects. And I'll give you an example. This is the original defects tool. Basically looks like this. I'll show you a fancier version in a second. But pick a defect, any defect, something that's gone not how you wanted to at some point over the past four weeks or so. Any defect the past month. It didn't have to result in patient harm. It did not have to result in injury. It didn't have to be an error. It's just something that happened that you don't want to have happen again. And then you have to answer these questions. What happened? Why did it happen? How do you reduce the risk of it happening again? And how will you know it's reduced? And with whom should you share your learning? That's the learning from a defect tool in a nutshell. Now, that's been, you can see the references here where that's been published several times since then. But we actually did that back when I was at Johns Hopkins. We put that in literature a number of times. Now, this begs the question, well, why don't you just use a root cause analysis? Well, root cause analyses are really important for sentinel events or things that are almost sentinel, but they really take a long time. They often involve people from outside of your work setting, and they don't build capacity in your unit. So in your work setting, you want people to be noticing and taking care of things and not having to pause and bring in some external people, have a committee meeting and then have people from outside your work setting tell you how you should be doing things differently inside your work setting. You want to build those capacities within your work setting. Also, root cause analyses, they're just not routine and predictable. And if they are routine and predictable, the tool that you're looking for is not mindful learning from defects, probably something else entirely. But it's the lack of routine that makes root cause analyses not useful as an instructive tool, something that you can do day to day. We need something for those events that are kind of less than sentinel, if you will. And that's where the mindfully learning from defects tool itself comes from. So this is what the tool looks like. This is the mindfully learning from defects tool. It's a little badge buddy that you can laminate it, put it right behind your hospital ID, and then if at any point something goes bump in the night, it doesn't have to be patient harm, but something that happens that you don't want to have happen again, you say, okay, what happened? Like Dragnet, right? Just the facts, ma'am. Have a brief description about what happened. The second part is, why did it happen? And this is where you engage mindfully, noticing what contributed positively and negatively, what prevented this from being worse, and what made this as being as bad as it was. So the positive factors and the negative factors. And just to trigger you, there's historical precedent. Oh, we've always done it that way. There's staffing issues, there's workload, there's equipment, there's production pressures, there's working with those other departments. We love to blame things on the other departments. There's caregiver issues like fatigue or attitude, management support. I don't trust my manager, they're never there. A failure of policy and procedure, a whole bunch of stuff just on policies and procedures. Do you know it? Do you follow it? Do others follow it? Can you trust that others are following it? There's patient condition. Do you know that 1 out of 5 patients in the U.S. can't read the headline of a U.S. newspaper? There's patient complexity. There's patient language barriers. Those are all examples of things to trigger what contributed positively or negatively to this particular defect. And then we ask the question, what can we do to reduce the risk of it happening with different people? If this happens to Cindy, but you take Cindy out of the equation and replace her with some random other person, could this happen again? It could happen again, so it's not about Cindy. Stop making it about Cindy and instead think about what is it about the situation that we have to change. This is called the substitution rule, and this is the key to the mindfully learning from defects tool writ large. If you really want to get the benefits of mindfully learning from defects, you have to master this one part, the substitution rule. What can we do to reduce the risk of it happening again, but with different people? If you can answer that question, you can use this tool. Now, the first time you use this tool, it might take you 30 or 45 minutes to walk through and answer these questions, write down the answers to the questions. But once you've done this 3 or 4 times, you'll find that it takes anywhere from 5 to 15 minutes, depending on the defect. You get really good at depersonalizing it. I can't tell you how many times we would have people in the staff meeting get up and leave, and they'd be crying, and there would be hurt feelings, and it was one more. The staff meetings became another source of drama, not a source of solutions to problems. And what was wonderful about this tool is it acts like a focus group facilitator, if you will. It's a way of focusing it on what's the problem, how do we reduce the likelihood of it happening in the future with different people involved. So now we've depersonalized it. It's not about Cindy. It's about this happens on Thursdays. Look, it only happens on Thursdays. What else happens on Thursdays? Oh, look at that. That explains why the problem always happens on Thursdays. This gets you to look at the pattern recognition more. And then you have to answer the question, how will we know that the risk was reduced? Do we need to audit something? Do we need to count something? Do we need to wait 4 or 5 months to see that happens again? And then with whom should we share and learn? So this is really relevant for us in the ICU, but boy, in telemetry and in the ED, they've got similar equipment. They got similar problems. Maybe we should tell people inside the unit that they could benefit from this lesson learned. Again, you're taking on a different perspective. You're mindfully engaging with the present, taking on different perspectives, and you'll find that that's not draining. That's actually kind of energizing. You feel, who else might this be useful to? This is exciting. I can solve other people's problems, not just problems, and it helps me understand kind of what my role is. And as is the case with all of the Duke Patient Safety Center tools, on the back, we always have at the back of the tool, what do I know? What do I need to do? What should I be worried about? And where's the evidence that this is actually real? If you a quick introduction to just the tool, not going into all we did today on mindfulness and the role of noticing and the importance of noticing and the benefits of noticing, you can always go to our Duke Patient Safety Center website, Safety as a System, and this actually gives you a very brief, like a 27-minute introduction to Safety as a System. If you're wanting to show a video, it's kind of like a Cliff Notes version of the webinar today. At a staff meeting, you can take a Safety as a System video, cut it in half, show it in 2 14-minute chunks, kind of at a staff meeting over time, and get people exposed to the mindfully learning from defects tool. We actually introduce the tool there if you find that to be helpful or meaningful. So why learning from defects? Why mindfully learning from defects? Well, we want to do it monthly for it to be sustainable. So it's a unit that's really quality improvement. Doing learning from defects in this mindful way is not, it's one of the few tools, it's one of the few tools in quality that doesn't actually increase burnout. We find that people who are actively doing mindfully learning from defects, their burnout levels stay the same or they get better. It doesn't actually increase load because it actually gives people a sense of control over what they're doing, not a sense of despair and helplessness about what they're doing. Doing it monthly makes it sustainable. If you try to do it every week, you'll never keep up with it. If you do it quarterly, you'll totally forget that you're doing it. It'll fall to the wayside. If you're doing it the third Thursday of every month, that's a way of doing it that is sustainable. We know also that this is a hybrid of what we traditionally think of as root cause analyses, which is a little bit too intense, and a debriefing, which is a little bit too informal. We need something for less than sentinel events, but we need the structure of that 5-step program, especially that substitution rule. If you master that, boy, you really have mastered mindfully learning from defects. And this is how you keep those switches on the radar. It creates local ownership for quality, so rather than bringing people from outside the unit to do root cause analysis, people from inside the unit are asking what happened, how do we prevent recurrence with different people, how will we know that we reduce the risks, and who do we need to share this information with. That really helps. And we can measure the improvements here on safety culture surveys. We've actually looked pre-post when rolling out these defects tools. We see more learning in the areas of others. People feel more encouraged to participate in patient safety and quality improvement, and they know where to direct their questions regarding safety as a result. You're just imbuing people with a little bit more control, a little bit more access to things that are important and meaningful to them. So your mantra around learning from defects is your job is to find and fix these defects so that we deliver the safest care in the world. And if you were to go to the GE, or if you were to go to General Motors, I should say, kind of in the year 2000, the year 2005, and when you ask somebody on the phone, what are you doing? They would say, I'm putting a door on the car here. Can't you see? My job is I put this door on this car. But if you were to go to Toyota at the same time and say, what are you doing here? The same spot on the assembly line, but in a Toyota factory, they'd say, we're making the best, safest cars in the world. And it's the way you approach that with a mindful mindset. What is it that you're doing? You're really learning from these defects. Where is this important? Well, if you've done safety culture assessments and you know that safety culture, we've actually had a call on safety culture. I think it was our first that we did together. You'll know that one of might come out of your if-then for safety culture is that you lack consensus about quality and safety. So you could show the video that we were just talking about before. You could also go straight from that video to doing these mindfully learning from defects exercises once a month, building it in as a routine. But if you need something even more than that, this is something we'll talk about on a future call. How do you build psychological safety, and how do you get executive partnerships involved with not just surfacing these defects, but them and preventing the occurrence of these defects? And just like we have a learning from defects tool, we'll have executive safety partnerships tool, and there's the cliff notes for that in case you're interested. So there are sources of defects that you can lean on. Adverse event reporting, sentinel event can oftentimes be great sources for learning from defects. Maybe there's an RCA going on, but there's a piece of this event that we want to fix and prevent from happening. We don't want to wait 3 or 4 or 5 months for the RCA to finish. We want to fix part of it right now. There's claims data that can be great sources for defects. Infection rates, walk in the line. Where did this break down? All kinds of complications, and even just asking the question, how is the next patient going to be harmed in this unit can be very helpful in understanding where your opportunities really lie. And so I'll just end with saying, in order for this to be meaningful, in order for this to be helpful, we want it to be monthly. It is less than a root cause analysis, but more than a debriefing is this mindfully learning from defects. It's the structure that kind of gives you the opportunity to exercise that noticing muscle. It creates local ownership for quality improvement. You can measure the efficacy of your mindfully learning from defects program just using your safety culture. You should be seeing safety climate or overall perceptions of safety kind of improving in the units where you're doing it. And this is really at the bottom line. This is getting at reliability through resilience and not at the expense of the resilience of your workforce. And so that's the mindfully learning from defects tool kind of in a nutshell there. I just wanted to end, and then we'll open it up for questions. I just want to end with the future directions are not just about noticing what's going poorly or noticing the defects, but also give people a chance to notice and do these positive reflections. This is a brand new bit of research. We've only written a post on this. We haven't written this up as a publication yet, but we're actually working on it right now. This is not in the literature yet, but I wanted to share with you a really cool function of positive reflections. And so the example items on safety culture survey are, in this work setting, the local management regularly makes time to pause and reflect about my work. The learning environment here allows us to pause and reflect about what we do well, or the learning environment allows us to gain insights into what we do well. This idea of pause and reflect on what's going well actually was significantly associated with people reporting less burnout, with people reporting work-life balance, better teamwork, and the biggest difference there was in safety norms. So taking the time to pause and reflect, not just on the defects, but also on what's going well is a whole new exciting area that we're focusing on. One of the things that we do is positive rounding, and so we, instead of just saying, how are we going to kill the next patient and what can we do to prevent it, when you have the chief nursing officer walk into your work setting, they also say, hey, tell me about successes that need to be celebrated, who's gone above and beyond, who deserves some special accolades. Give me an example of what they've done. I'd like to write a handwritten letter so they can receive that at home, and we can just talk about how much we value their contributions here. So that's an example of where noticing mindfulness is not just focused on the defects, but also on what's going well. At the beginning, as Joa mentioned, psychological safety is going to be our next call, our September topic. And if you're interested in getting some continuing education credits today, there's the bit.ly link for the webinar. It's a defect tool, bit.ly/defect tool. And if you're interested in our resilience tool, we have about 15 or 1,600 people enrolled in our current cohort for WISER, which is our web-based implementation for the science of enhancing resilience. So that's the tool for resilience on the bottom. That's a tool for that's a link right there for your continuing education if you're interested there at the top. And next month, we'll come back and talk about psychological safety. I'd love to, if we could, open it up for some questions and see if people have any thoughts they'd like to share.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sexton. And yes, it is time for Q&A, so please use your chat tool you can find on your WebEx interface and select Host and Presenter in the drop-down arrow, and then type in your question and click Send. We'll pause momentarily and wait for questions.
I think I saw that one. So is mindfulness a personality trait? So no, it's there are people who are naturally more mindful, but it is a skill that you can learn. You don't have to be blessed with a certain personality profile to be able to engage in it and get the benefits of it. I think more to the point, mindfulness in terms of meditation is a skill that you learn over time. But just triggering mindfulness, even in a moment, even in a situation, is something that you can turn on and off with specific triggers. Parents are good at triggering mindfulness in their kids. Certain leaders are good at triggering mindfulness in their staff, and certain designers are really good at triggering mindfulness in their websites and in their apps and things. It's just about getting people to be more comfortable noticing. But it's not a personality trait. No one is doomed to be a personality profile. Anybody wants to, if you take the time to learn it, you can get the benefits. So is mindful learning from defects published in the literature? Yes, it's been published a number of times in the literature. You can find it under Learning from Defects, and more recently, Mindfully Learning from Defects. But the tool, the core of the tool is really that substitution rule, where would this happen again with different people involved? And if the answer is yes, this could happen again with different people, then you haven't solved the problem. You've just found a new reason to be mad at Mark or at Jonathan. So instead, maybe focus on how do we prevent recurrence of the problem, not thinking so much about whose fault it was this particular time. Did you see any more there, Joa? Oh, when does the Mindfully Learning from Defects tool not apply? So you wouldn't just use the Mindfully Learning from Defects tool in lieu of a root cause analysis if you're talking about a sentinel event. But I will tell you this. Many people many units that we've worked with have opted to try mindfully learning from defects to own a problem or to start working on a problem locally or a piece of the problem locally while there is a root cause analysis happening on a larger scale, that's going to take a longer time to complete. I'll also say there's nothing clinical about mindfully learning from defects. You don't have to be in a nursing unit. You don't have to be a clinician to get benefits from it. We use this in accounting. We use this in IT. We use this in administrative work. We've used this at the Patient Safety Center for a variety of problems that just had nothing to do with patient care. It's just there's a defect that happened. You don't want it to happen again. What can you do? Well, you can go through those 5 questions and answer them. And it's just like having a focus group facilitator, but you happen to be wearing that focus group facilitator underneath your hospital ID badge. So if you want to sit down and talk about something in a depersonalized way, you just flip over your hospital ID, and then boom, you've got those questions and answers. And it does not take much time to go through it. See if there's other questions.
Okay, I'm not seeing any questions, but if one comes in as I'm doing my wrap-up, we will sure address it. So at this time, I'd like to thank all of our attendees, and thank you, Dr. Sexton, for a great webinar. And once again, our next webinar will be on September 6th, and I will be sending out handouts as well as the recording this afternoon, hopefully. And I'm just paused because I do see one last question coming in. I'm not sure if you see that, Dr. Sexton.
Should it be a standalone tool or integrated? People use Mindfully Learning from Defects integrated with other processes like executive rounding, positive rounding. They also use it as a standalone tool. You can use it as a one-off, or you can bake it into a routine thing that you do once a month. It's pretty agnostic to application, but that series of questions really works. There's 5 questions, and keeping it really handy, like laminating it on a card and just putting it behind your hospital ID is an easy way of just making it handy like that. Go ahead, Joe. I'm sorry.
No, let me start. That's great. Well, I'm not seeing any additional questions. So again, I'd like to thank everyone for your participation today, and thank you, Dr. Sexton, and I will conclude the webinar at this time.
Wonderful. See you next month.
Yep. Thank you, sir.
You bet.